Okay, we're going to welcome the blink sketch to our activity space. As we go into Arduino, we can access examples through the file menu. And having installed the ESP8266, we have access to special examples for that board. We click on the blink example. And now we have that example right here in front of us. And let's take a look at it. It's really pretty minimalistic in terms of what it does, and the code necessary as well is very minimalistic. What does it do? Well, it blinks a light on and off. It blinks a built-in LED. Here's where it's turning it on, making the LED high. And here's where it's turning it off, making the LED low. What these delays are for are allowing the LED to be, in this case, off for a second, which is 1,000 milliseconds. And in this case, this delay is allowing the LED to be on for 2,000 milliseconds or 2 seconds. Okay, the first thing I'm going to ask us to do here is just go ahead and clean up some of these comments. These are nice to acknowledge the creator and to identify some of the clues into what the code does, but it's going to get in our way. So let's go ahead and get at least that much of the comments out. And it is true that the setup runs once and the loop runs over and over again. Let's also take the liberty of taking this loop out here as well. And there we can leave these comments over here. They're not going to hurt anything. Just keep our workspace a little cleaner here. All right, so what our task is going to be here is to take this blink sketch and to convert it into a sketch which does some Morse code. So if we were to go over to the International Morse Code standard over here, we have the length of a dot is 1 unit. A dash is 3 units. The space between parts of the same letter is 1 unit. The space between letters is 3 units. And the space between words is 7 units. There we have the basic international standard for Morse code spelled out. And then here are the actual codes for the individual letters and numbers, question mark, period, and comma as well. Okay, so what your task is going to be here is to make some type of message. It could be a very short word, could even be a number, I guess. Could be a group of symbols such as question marks. It could really be anything using the Morse code and trying to adhere to this standard as much as possible. Okay, so what we're going to do here is going to take you through a little example here with SOS. I'm going to show you an example I put together with SOS, and then after that, I'll work through just a simple hi, with the letters HI. And let's go ahead and take a look again at the code that we're starting with. We're starting with over here the ability to turn off an LED and then wait a second, for example, and turn on an LED and wait for 2 seconds. So we want to work with this basic idea of turning off and turning on an LED and waiting certain amounts of time. We want to take those and we want to rebuild. We want to use those to build, a Morse code communicating application. So let's go ahead and we're going to break out some of this functionality. For example, writing low for a certain period of time. In other words, turning something off for a certain amount of time. That's pretty much pausing or delaying for a certain amount of time or keeping it off, which we can call it, as we will see here in a moment, I'll actually give a name to it. So I'm going to go over here, pull up this file where I've already done some of the legwork. And if you notice what I've done here is if I look at the actual loop, the end result, we'll start with the end result and we'll work backwards. What I've actually been able to do is come up with a function that creates an S, or signals an S, or calls an S, and then a function called space that can create a space for a certain amount of time, or pause between, in this case, letters, and then over here a function that calls O, and then pausing for a certain amount of time, and then calling S again, and then pausing for a certain amount of time over here. And all of these amounts of time are adhering to the standard right over here. So let's go ahead and take a look at each of these individual functions, S, O, S, and then the space function. So let's go up here. Let's go ahead and look at the S function first. So the S function is actually composed of, or is made up of, or uses the dot function, another function that we made that will create a dot, and then we use that space function again to put some delay in between the dots. So dot, 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 basically, with a little bit of delay in between, a little bit of space in between. So we have dot, 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 that's the S. And then for the O, we have dash, 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 again with a certain amount of space in between. So where are these dot, space, and dash functions at? Well, they're up a little higher here. So here we have dot, space, and dash. So what is a dot? Well, if you think about a dot and a dash are just going to be keeping the LED on for a certain amount of time. And the dot's going to be on for less time than a dash. If we look at the standard, the dot is 1 unit and a dash is 3 units. So in this case, we're using a dot to be on for 500 milliseconds, or half a second. And we're using a dash, or defining a dash is for the LED to be on for 1.5 seconds, or 1500 milliseconds. So that's how we defined our dot and a dash. A dot is the LED being on for half a second, and the dash is the LED being on for 1.5 seconds, or 3 times as long. And again, that confirms or conforms to agrees with the international standard for Morse code, where a dot is a length of 1 unit and a dash length is 3 units. In this case, our units are going to be considered, units of time are going to be considered half a second, or 500 milliseconds. 1 unit of 500 milliseconds is 500. 3 times 500 milliseconds is 1500. And then the space is going to be a function that takes a certain input. And it's going to take this input parameter or argument that's going to be an integer and it's going to represent a number of milliseconds, because depending on how much we are going to, how much space we need, we're going to put in a different number of milliseconds. So what does really a space mean? A space means that the light is going to be off for a certain amount of time. So putting the light off is writing the LED to low, and then for a certain amount of time is being specified by the amount that's passed into the function. So let's go ahead then and bing, bing, bing. And we can see the setup function is nothing more than setting the LED button to output. Let's go ahead and create an M, or actually I said I was going to do high. Let's do high, H and I. So the first thing we want to do is gives ourselves some space here to write an M function an H function and an I function. So let's go over here and carve us up some little space, and let's go over here and we'll put void. Our function's not going to return anything, it's just going to do something. Let's go over here and say void, and we'll say I guess H, or I guess I use capital letters. I use capital H, and then we'll go ahead and put just a skeleton of a function in here, and we'll get ready to put some stuff in here for an h. Let's find out what an h requires. Let's go over here. If we look at the h, oh, that's nice. An h is 4 dots. So over here, for the h, I would want to do something similar to the s. The s is 3 dots. So guess what I'm going to do? Yes, copy and paste. Good old friend of the coders. Yep. And there we go. We have dot, dot, dot. At this point, we only need to get one more dot to comply with the way Morse code works, with 4 dots being the h. So we have dot, 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 dot. And then we have the appropriate space in there as well. And how do we know this is the appropriate space? Well, let's just go ahead and look. This is between or within a letter. So within a letter itself, let's go see what the standard is. So the space between parts of the same letter is 1 unit. And as we said, 1 unit was going to be half a second or 500 milliseconds. So that's why we have 500 here, because we are within the letter. Now let's go over and make a letter I for high, because we're going to make the word high down here. Okay, so we are going to put void again, because we're not going to return anything in our function. And we're going to call this function I, and then we're going to create the function body with the open and closing curly brace. And we're just going to get that function defining space ready. And next, we are going to go ahead and look up what the I is defined as in the International Morse Code specification. So an I is simply 2 dots. Wow, pretty easy. I is 2 dots. So over here, guess what? Yes, you guessed it. You guessed it. Copy and paste. And could it be easier? I don't think so. That's about as easy as it could possibly be. So currently, our loop is doing SOS. If we wanted to change our, message that we're sending out, let's just say that we weren't in an emergency situation at this point and requiring us to send out SOS, but instead we were going to say hi. How will we do that? Well, instead of S at the beginning, we would put, well, literally, I don't even have to change it. No, I can just literally change the H, and then we wouldn't say O, but instead we would say I, and we would take off this amount of space, but instead we would have this amount of space between words. So why do we have 3.5 seconds between words? Okay. So over here, let's go ahead and look at the space between words. The space between words is 7 units. So 7 times 500, or 7 times 5 is 35, and then 2 zeros is 3,500 milliseconds, or 3.5 seconds. So right here, we now have complied with or conformed to the international specification for Morse code, and we have added a few other letters to our function group of functions here, our repertoire of functions. We've added the ability to make an H and the ability to make an I. And I guess now the burden would just be running this and trying to, get savvy and learn the Morse code language. Well, hopefully this was clear in describing this process of using the blink sketch and kind of converting it into a Morse code game, or maybe not a game. Maybe it's a very serious thing that you're going to be using to signal SOS and literally save a life or lives. Thank you.